And I used to tour over there, and this will be a good, might be a good segue into sort of my past, the deep mysterious past of the many different George McClures who have wandered this planet. But I actually used to tour over there. I moved to Nashville 23 years ago to resume my writing and music career. And I had one goal in mind, which was to play music for a living again, which I had done previously, of course. And then I struck on a venue base that was unexplored, and it wasn't being, people didn't know about it. It was brand new as a kind of a condo market. And I started spreading out from Nashville to Atlanta, and then I went over to Carolina because I'd lived in Carolina for 7 years, so around Charlotte and the Tri-Cities. And then it was just a hop and a skip and a jump down there to Rock Hill, and then from Rock Hill down to Greenville and Columbia. So I ended up touring through that part of the country for several years. And so I toured for about 10 years in the 90s, and then I reinvented myself or remade myself into a record producer, and I've recorded since then. In the 00 decade, I've recorded about 50 to 60, over 50 albums for other people, and I have 2 albums of my own and DVDs and so on of my own, but I was a record producer for other people, helping them. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of decades. But before that, skipping back to when I graduated University of Arizona with a bachelor's in anthropology and cognition. I'm making a little bit of tea. And in cognitive anthropology, which is kind of a study of language and thought and reality. And it was a brand new field at that time. And I promptly became a deadbeat professional musician. You know, I already knew I was going to be a musician because I was playing enough I could support myself. And I became a professional musician. And I did that for about 5 years. And I'll try to make this the thumbnail sketch. I wrote a book, the first book on improvisation for five-string banjo, and it was the only book for about 20 years. Finally, somebody wrote another one. It's called Variations on Theme. But then I got parked over in Carolina, Michael, up just north of you. I was over in Charlotte area, and I thought I could spend another 15 years in music and maybe be able to buy a new car and a house if I'm really lucky after 15 years. Or I could go back to college and pick up another degree in computer science or business, something sexy. Those were hot markets, those were hot fields then in the 80s. And in just 2 years or 3 years investment in my time, I could be making the same amount of money where I could afford a brand new car, which was very important to me then, or a house so I could have a family. And so I decided to go back to school, and I just loved computer science and mathematics. I absolutely loved it. And I got a degree, and I worked for a year and a half, and then I went on and got a master's at Texas A&M University, one of the top 10 at that time in engineering. And then I took a job close to Nashville down in Huntsville where I was above top secret. Actually, I was FBI, SBSI, federal compartmentalized security clearance, building software for the feds on a DOD project. And then after a year and a half, we finished that project. We finished the contract. You could either find another job in the company or bail, and I decided to bail. And NASA, Lockheed at NASA Johnson Space Center, flew me out for an interview. And they gave me an expense account for 5 days. They gave me a car and an expense account hotel for 5 days, and they talked to me they toured me through the Johnson Space Center base for a day. You get a full day tour, just like all the tourists get. And then the next day they talked to me in the morning, and we went out and ate lunch, and then I was done. So I had 3.5 days of expense account in a car to do whatever I wanted before my plane flew me back to Alabama. So it looked pretty good there. And they offered me a pretty good jump up in money. And if you're in anything engineering, who could turn down a space job anyway?
Sure.
So I took it. I took it knowing deep in my heart and my soul that I was doing the wrong thing. But I did it anyway because, you know, I don't really want to be a rocket scientist or a mathematician. I really want to be who I am. Now, you know, I really want to be a singer and a performing artist and a writer and, you know, a spiritualist, which are the things I really am. So I took the job because who could turn it down? And it only lasted a short 1.5, 2 years. And I said, take this job and shove it. I did it very politely, but I resigned and, like Johnny Paycheck, take this job and shove it. And I packed it up in my pickup truck and moved to Nashville with not a damn thing to my name but the pickup truck and a banjo and a guitar. And, well, I did own a little mobile home park out there in Texas.
Yeah.
But I moved here and went from, I probably had what is quite possibly the most prestigious day job in the history of music. Mike Curb had a pretty darn good day job, Curb Records. Mike Curb was the Secretary of State, if I remember right. He was the Secretary of State for the state of California. He was pretty high up the food chain. And he moved here and, of course, founded Curb Records, which is essentially like a major label now. So that's my history, Michael. Pretty much a 2-thumbnail version of it.
I see. Now, in your time, you've done some pretty extensive studies, you say, on Planet X and things of that nature. So I thought maybe we could start there, unless you had something you wanted to throw in beforehand.
Well, no, I think just to compound your question is maybe what got you started, what intrigued you, what moved you in the direction of beginning to research Planet X or Nibiru or whatever you choose to call it.
Okay, cool. Let's see, some research on the dwarf twin star Nibiru, Planet X. Okay, well, what I did, you guys, and I think you'll dig this, Ryan and Michael, is I have a sense that, even though I don't know each of you very well, I have a sense that you're probably independent operators to some extent, because you've got a radio show, and Ryan, you probably to some extent self-employed and so on. But being an entrepreneur here in Nashville, I built up a pretty good company, McClure and Trowbridge Publishing, and then I spawned off another, a spawnling called Nashville School of Music, which was pretty much roaring for 5 or 6 or 7 years with a Star Search event and workshops and stuff. And I was doing pretty well. I wasn't playing music, and I wasn't very happy, but I was doing well as far as the dollar signs are concerned. And then what happened, Michael, Ryan, to answer your question, in 2007, I saw my earnings just go to hell in a handbasket. And of course, I spent, being a math head anyway, I spent considerable time, you know, I look at the books and I run graphs and I know what's going on. And I saw it nosedive in the final quarter of 06. In 07, it was going down. Everybody was still chipper and spending money. But I saw a nosedive occurring, and I started digging around, and by 2008, I knew we were in a full-bore collapse of one sort or another. And then, of course, 2008 is when Paulson and Bush and whoever got on the mainstream TV and said, people, we got bad news for you. The country's bankrupt and Wall Street's collapsing, and Countrywide had gone under a year and a half ago, and the entire insurance industry was collapsed, and Olson said we have to extract $3 trillion from you good people. And if you remember, he was shaking like a leaf. That guy had more stress going on than I've ever seen in a human being.
Yeah.
He knew if we knew what he was doing, we'd string him up, kill him on the spot. But they literally stole like $3 trillion from the American people from us that night. So what I did, Ryan, I really dove into this financial collapse stuff in a huge way. I'm independent. I can spend time on what I want to spend time on. And I was spending anywhere from 20 hours a week to 60 hours a week researching it. And I got into Eustace Mullins and Bob Chapman, all these gurus, and James Corbett, gurus of people who really understand Wall Street and the collapse and everything going on and the financial structure of the entire Western civilization. And I started studying it back 2,000 years, and I really got seriously involved in it, and there was a whole collapse scenario. And I started making strategies, which I think everybody's doing now. So I was making strategies for protecting myself against a total collapse, and bought a piece of rural property, designed a passive solar, put in a farm, a micro farm. I did all this stuff, and I was consumed with it. And then along the way, I got into GMO. I discovered, well, fluoridated water was killing me. And I grew up on spring water running out of the side of the mountain. So the fluoride trail led me into GMO and all the other toxic crap they're doing to us. And then I went from that. I've just been writing on those topics for years, whatever I'm looking at the moment. And then as far as Planet X, and we'll bring it right up to Planet X, as far as that's concerned, I did a heavy, hard hit research into anything scientific evidence for a planetary or twin star system body included in our solar system. About 2008 I did it, or no, it was about 2010, 4 or 5 years ago. And I uncovered, is it Sedna? They call it Sedna. And one Japanese duo of science physicists that identified a planetary or dwarf star object on a 3,600-year orbit, counter to the plane of all our planetary, our planets and the sun are all in one plane. They're all on, like they'd be level on a tabletop. Well, this Sedna thing is contrary to that at 90 degrees. It doesn't fit on the same stellar plane or solar system plane. And that's all I could find about it, was it was on a 3,600-year orbit, but that correlated with everything the myth and the historic information we know about Planet X or Nibiru or Sedna or whatever you want to call it, and all the ancient myths, whether they're Mayan or Hopi or Inca or Sumerian or Greek or whatever, or the Bible, they all correlate.
I agree with you. They do correlate. Let me cut in just for a moment and ask.
Yeah, sure.
A lot of people who listen will want this question asked, I think, especially the skeptics. How much of your research, though, came from people like Zecharia Sitchin?
Zero from Zecharia Sitchin. I've listened to Edward Casey. Besides being a musician and a writer, a lifelong writer and musician, I'm a highly trained scientist. So when I look at something like one of these topics, I dig into it, and I'm going to look at it critically. I'm going to be critically in the sense of scientifically or empirically critical. So when I looked 4 or 5 years ago, and I came up with the research of these two Japanese scientists, I was looking only for empirical scientific evidence at that point. I didn't look at any of them. I know the mythological and the historic stories of the Hopi and the Maya and other people who have said in the Bible. I've heard all these things all my life, but I did not use those as research bases, Ryan. I only used scientific things. And then I set it aside until absolutely recently. And this was just a matter of 2 weeks ago. Let me see if there's a date on this. 26 December 2014, which is 10 Ish on the Mayan calendar, the Mayan Solkin. So I researched this just a couple of weeks ago, and this time, Ryan, when I dug into it, I was using other reports, still not Sitchin. And but let me see what some of these other sources are, and I can, because people are going to want to know, and I can dig right into this.
Did you
bucket.
Go ahead.
A photo bucket of what Google is hiding. Okay, so I was looking at why are Google and Microsoft now hiding a quadrant of the Google sky in Microsoft sky, and why is that right at the same place we suspect Ellen and Comet or the brown dwarf twin star or Planet X is coming? I looked at that in detail. I looked at JPL NASA documents, a few of them, and I looked at, let's see.
Did you ever do any research outside of photographs of more modern times? Did you do research into a text called the Colburn Bible?
I did not. I have so far, in this serious look at it that I've taken has only been 2 weeks, by the way. So no, I didn't, and I haven't utilized those sources. Let me tell you a little bit more about some of my current sources. There's a South Pole telescope, the SPT, that in 2008 supposedly took an image, and those images are on YouTube, and they're in my research brief on the dwarf twin star Planet X that I wrote 2 weeks ago. So I looked at those photos, but only from the 2008. The one rock-hard source I found about Planet X is the 1983 mainstream news report all over the English-speaking world that Planet X or a dwarf twin star, small little solar system, had been identified, and this would have been 31 years ago. So what I was looking at, Ryan, when I did this research brief on the 26th of December, what I was looking for was one specific thing. I wanted to identify when this Planet X dwarf twin star object is going to be here. That's what I was trying to get a metric on. So in order to describe a metric, I can't use a source that came out of a writing in a Bible, because the Bible isn't going to give me, or the source you mentioned, or a Mayan or Hopi prophecy. I can't use those as a metric, because for a metric, I need numbers in order to say, okay, Planet X was, in 1983, it was X number of miles away, no pun intended, 50 billion miles away, and then it was spotted in 2008, supposedly, by the South Pole telescope, and I have to get a metric on what its distance was then And then I can calculate very accurately how far away Planet X is, or this dwarf twin star solar system is, right now. So see, I was working on one particular question: when is it going to get here?
So I agree with the method that you're taking. That, I mean, why have we not, or maybe we have, felt the effects of something that massive coming into close proximity with our solar system and Earth? Have we felt the effects of that?
Well, first of all, it may not be in close proximity yet. And second of all, we do feel the effects of it constantly, and that's what astronomers we have to understand that Western science is puny. You know, we're in the Western civilization, so we're all taught science is king, and empiricism is the fundamental of the whole universe of man, and of course it's not even close. But the Inca and the Mayan civilizations were far, far advanced, and they had knowledge of all these things. So we have a record of some of what they saw, but also in the Western, puny Western science, just 100 years ago, just 80 years ago, Pluto was discovered, quote. Well, the Mayans knew about it 3,000 years ago. But anyway, the astronomers 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 50 years ago have noticed that Neptune doesn't have an orbit that's coincidental, that makes sense, that's correct, with only having the 9 planets and the Sun. There's something else that's pushing Neptune and Jupiter and Saturn out of their orbits just a little bit. So for a long time, Western sciences, astronomers, for 100 years or more, have known that there are some forces pulling, especially on Neptune, and so that's what Planet X is. In all likelihood, Sedna may not be big enough to pull it.
Yeah, and I know at one point years ago, they thought, when they discovered Pluto, they thought that could have been what was doing it, until they discovered how small Pluto was, and then they realized that couldn't have the effect. But now my thing is, I've had some so-called experts tell me that it's between Jupiter and Saturn and in that area, and I mean, it would have to be. Yeah, well. Oh, okay. Well, what I was going to say, though, is when it gets that close, the sun is going to reflect off either it or some of the objects around it. And so at that point, I think we'll be seeing it, wouldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said it can't be there yet. And that's one of the things I looked at here 2 weeks ago, and I have it on a sheet in front of me. That was one of the reports I looked at. I concluded that it couldn't be. That was the first thing I looked at, trying to use it as a metric. And I concluded it couldn't be inside the orbit of Jupiter, because once it gets that close, like you said, we'll be able to see it with the naked eye. And the other thing is, when it gets that close, all hell's going to be broken loose. You know, there's going to be a whole lot more going on than there is right now. Some of the planets may be moving out of their orbit, and amateur astronomers, the backyard guy with a $1,000 telescope, all over the planet, they're going to be seeing this stuff and going crazy with it. We could, at that point, be seeing volcanic eruptions and floods and tidal waves over this planet of unimaginable proportions. Maybe not, but I expect it's the really ripping at the gravitational forces of planet Earth. And we're going to know it. When it gets into our inner solar system, we're going to know it.
So let me ask you this. How far away do you anticipate it being? I've had people told me, it was going to hit in 2011, it was going to hit in 2012, and now next year it's going to hit, or this year, I don't know. People jump on anything. And I'm not for me, yeah, there's something out there, but I don't know where it is, and so I guess that's what I'm trying to find out. So what do you know?
I'm totally with you, and that's exactly what I was trying to nail down. And here's what I found. I'll run it down for you. I started looking with the 1983 report, which I consider a solid report. It was in all the mainstream media for a reason. Now, in 1983, it was stated that Planet X, or the dwarf twin solar system, the dark sun, was 50 billion miles away. So that's my first metric. 1983, 50 billion miles away. And then I looked at the metric of, there was that report of a telescope seeing it in 2008 inside the orbit of Jupiter. So the very first thing I did was calculate 0.8 billion miles from the sun to Jupiter. 0.8 billion, 800 million miles from the sun to Jupiter. Earth to Jupiter is 4 AU, or about 0.64 billion miles from Earth to Jupiter. So if we just do a simple interpolation on that, if in 2008, Planet X was the distance away of Jupiter, that's 0.64 billion miles. And in 1983, it was 50 billion miles, hard data. Well, I just did interpolation on that, and I found if those two facts were true, that Planet X would have been here years ago. It would have already been here and gone. So I discount the so-called sighting in 2008 with the pictures of Planet X. I discount that because it doesn't correlate with what my numbers tell me. So I continued, Michael, continuing. So I went on from there, and I said, okay, my next possible metric point is Google sky is blocking out the same quadrant of sky that we know, from which we know Planet X, dwarf twin, should approach us if it's really coming. We know it's coming from that quadrant, and they're blocking it out. When did they start blocking it out? 2014. That gives me a metric. Right now, this is fact, you cannot see Planet X. It's visible only with infrared telescopes in the infrared spectrum. But just like Ryan said, as soon as it gets close enough, we're all going to see it. And they're not going to be able to keep it hidden. But here's the fact. If they're blocking out Google Sky, they must be afraid that it's about to be visible, right? So they wouldn't be blocking it out if it was invisible. So I asked my friend, actually, I asked a friend of mine, would you mind looking up how far telescopes see in the visible spectrum? And we got some information. She sent me some information, and then I double-checked it and researched it on from there myself. Well, the Hubble telescope is one of the telescopes that's used for Google Sky, and it's probably the strongest one. And it sees a distance of 4.2 billion miles. So I'm collecting hard metrics. I'm collecting what we would call facts, empirical data. So the Hubble telescope identified and saw a little asteroid, 3,200 feet in diameter, so half a mile in diameter, in the Kuiper belt, the Kuiper belt, which is 4.2 billion miles away. So I know the Hubble will see 4.2 billion miles in visible light. So you see, they want to close off the Google sky when that Planet X is going to become visible. So I know that the Hubble can see at about 4.2. I just rounded up to 5 billion miles. And this 2014 is the year that Google decided to block it out. So it could be that Planet X is about 5 billion miles away because they're blocking out Google Sky. They're afraid we're going to see it on Google Sky. Maybe they're doing it ahead of time a year, Michael, and maybe they're not. But I know they blocked it out now, and I'm pretty damn sure that they don't want us to see it, and that's why they're blocking out that quadrant. So I have two hard pieces of data, 5 billion miles, 2014, and 50 billion miles, 1981. So I did a simple interpolation, and it comes out to 3.5 years. If these things I just mentioned are true, that Google blocked it out because Planet X is coming in there, and they don't want us to see it, and they didn't block it out ahead of time by 5 years. Maybe I'm saying they blocked it out this year because it's becoming visible this year on Hubble, then we're looking at 3.5 years. That's the metric, and that's mathematics. Now, the only variable in there is maybe Google blocked it out 2 years ahead of time just to be sure, in which case that'd throw my metric up to 7.75 years for Planet X arrival. That's arrival to Earth. That's not arrival to Jupiter. That's not arrival into our close solar system, not counting the Kuiper belt or the Oort cloud, but into, the Pluto, Neptune, Jupiter thing, into our close solar system. That's to planet Earth. So we're going to see it, and it's going to be creating havoc way before that. Like I said, by the time it's around Jupiter or the outer planets, we're all going to know about it. So that's what I found out. That's what my research report was in the last 2 weeks. And I have all the numbers. If anybody wants to contact me, I'll be happy to give you all the numbers, and you can check my arithmetic. And if you have anything else you know about it, in fact, I put it right in my research brief. Email me, contact me immediately if you have any information about a sighting of Planet X or the dwarf twin, or how far away it is. Any report at all, get it to me.
Be careful what you be careful what you ask, because I've done that in the past, and you'll get all kinds of stuff sent to you. Which, if you got time to weed through it, all the power to you.
Well, the other part of that, Michael, is I have a private email address, and nobody knows it. Well, you do, but only my inner loop, so to speak. I have 32 different email addresses, and the ones that I use for this kind of stuff are private. Nobody has them for only selected individuals. So I'm not gonna give out an email address on the radio program tonight. I'm gonna tell people how to find my stuff. Is to go to georgemcclure.net. That's the main source for my stuff. OfficialGeorgeMcClure.com will give you all my stuff, music. But GeorgeMcClure.net, you can go there, and I'm not going to tell people my email address. They have to figure out how to get in touch with me. So I automatically screen all that information out, if I'm going to get 10,000 emails.
Yeah.
So now on GeorgeMcClure.net, you can look, I'll just point you, there's an index over on the left. There's some key reading on the front. You'll see that I'm a spiritualist, and I'm also the music and the mathematical sciences. But over on the left, there's a link that's called Journal of the Collapse. And you can click that, and that has a lot of good reading in it. I put some of these research briefs I post to Journal of the Collapse. I plan to post this entire dwarf twin star Nibiru research brief to it. I just haven't gotten to it yet. And so there'll be some of my more cogent, valiant research briefs will be posted on Journal of the Class. Another thing you can click on is letters. If you like to hear somebody rip somebody out, some other idiot, to shreds, go to letters, and you'll see some idiots I've encountered, like the science guy in Metro Nashville who tried to tell me chemtrails don't exist. So I had to destroy him publicly, you know. So some of those things will be on there if you like that kind of reading. And then there's another, one more link over on the left I'll point people to is Chronologue. And Chronologue started when there was the Horizon event oil collapse incident in the Gulf of Mexico several years ago. And they were spraying Corexit dispersant in such horrendous quantities. It was coming up here, poisoning me. I was sick. Thousands of people were sick up here, millions along the coast. And so I was chronologuing the pictures in my front yard, and my garden the plants had holes burned through the leaves every time it rained and stuff. So that's how it started, and then it went over into the radiation from Fukushima, and I write research based on there. And then with pictures, then I went into all this chemspray geoengineering stuff and take time-lapse. I've got time-lapse photos and so on, and descriptions of how it makes me sick and how it makes other professional singers in Nashville sick. We all get sick at the same time, and it's right after 3 days of heavy spraying and stuff. So I correlate all these factors that a lot of other people don't. And I also had for a while a friend who was a nurse, and we would wake up coughing in the night, and then she'd go to work and come back and say, "Doctor said," we had a never-ending stream of people coming in, and they all had the same cough that we had last night. "What's it from?" And I said, "It's from the chemtrail, darling. Just look up in the sky." You know, it all happens at the same time. So that kind of data will be in Chronologue in a less scientific format, a more readable and pictures format.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I've got to the point I won't argue with people over chemtrails anymore. I've said this a while ago. Class 101, that was a long time ago, and if you've missed the class, I'm sorry, you failed, because a lot of people want to waste your time and argue with you about these things and keep you from actually finding solutions for them. And I don't know what the solution is outside of somebody needs to just, it has been exposed, but I mean, I don't know what it's going to take. I think if we took a plane out of the sky, if we landed it and we on Main Street and we opened up the hatch and showed everybody the tanks that they're spraying from in these planes, an hour later they'd be back to watching Whose Line Is It Anyways, and that'd be it. Yeah. So they'd forget all about it.
About 60% of the population would go, ho-hum, and I need to buy some lunch, and I need to go back to what's my line or whatever. Yeah, I think, but I think all I know about that, Michael, is what's the solution? All I know about this is I was born into this world, into this planet, a truth seer. I see the truth. Nobody has to tell it to me. I don't have to figure it out. I just see it. I'm not unique in this regard, and I'm a truth teller. I'm one of those people that if you come over, somebody comes over and tells me your foot is not black and my foot is black, I'm going to chase them and hound them until. I'm going to make the biggest point out of it. If some idiot down in Metro Nashville tries to tell me that chemtrails don't exist because he's reading off a third-grade script that he gets fed, and, his intellectual capacity is essentially a third grader's, and, some idiot like that tries to tell me that, I'm going to spend 1,800 hours proving them wrong and telling everybody I know what a fool he is, So I'm indomitable I'm a truth teller, and I'm not going to stop. You can chain me to the wall, I'm still going to do it. The only way you can stop me is put a bullet through my head. And so far, they haven't done it.
Well, they use nail guns now, too.
Yeah, that's very true. Shoot yourself in the head 8 or 9 times with the nail gun. You know, I'm kind of like that myself. I used to be more strict about it. Nowadays, I just don't care as much. Not in the sense that I don't care about informing people, but when people are very, very ignorant and choose to they just openly choose not to respect what you have to say, but expect you to believe what they have to say. Usually what they have to say in terms of the mainstream politics, religion, science is based on a dogma. It's based on faith. While people like us who do research, we have the facts to back up what we say, or at least have an open mind. We have to somehow socially prove what we're saying, even when it's factual. But others who believe in things based on faith, because it's socially accepted, don't have to prove things based on fact. They can just say, well, everybody else believes that, and they can generalize it. So that's part of the social conditioning of our culture. I think it's part of a bigger social control structure. It's very, very rooted in the depths of corporate symbolism and music and movies and television. It's something I think that can be studied on a whole nother level, and I think Planet X falls into that because it has been, whether physically, visibly distorted, at least the image of it and the information we know about what we think is Planet X or Nibiru or Wormwood or Nabaru, which is another terminology that means light gate, I believe, for Sumeria, another book I read about it. There's just a whole bunch of different things that it could be, and we're arguing about what it could be when, in fact, that there probably is something that exists, and we should probably focus more on studying what actually exists rather than what might be and having no meaningless, pointless debates. But we got to take a short break.
The Last Frequency. I'm Michael Vera with Ryan Gable. That was George McClure you just heard. He gets the alien. I got Satan back in the day. Had 10 years in hell. I finally broke out. And but that was a great job there, George. I love that.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a fun one. I got the alien, and I got the little half-breed alien girl named Allie, short for Alien. But when I released that album, Michael, it went out, and my voice is a little bit hoarse. It's just all that chemical crap they sprayed last night. But when I released that album, of course, it mailed out to radio stations all over the U.S. and Canada, and it went one radio station it went to is in Ruidoso, New Mexico, which is right next door to Roswell, New Mexico. And the DJ there went wild. He called up and he said, I got your CD, I got George McClure's CD, and we're playing an alien music it's about Roswell, that's right here. And I said, yeah, man, it's written about your town, But I'm going to stop in there my next trip through New Mexico. I'm going to go through Ruidoso just so I can meet that DJ, because he got a big kick out of it.
Oh yeah, I did too when I listened to it today. I says, oh, I've got to use that.
When that song came out, it came out in the 90s, the end of the 90s, and I'd play it for audiences touring, and they would, I got mixed responses. One crowd would be totally cool and totally clued in on it, can really get a kick out of it. And the next crowd would just sit there like it was going over their heads totally. But now when I play it, everybody gets it. Everybody is totally tuned in, so things have really changed.
Isn't it amazing how it has?
Yeah.
It has changed a lot. And mostly the people who argue with you in forums or try to argue with you about these things are usually paid, or they're just trolls. I mean, because I think most people that are using just a portion of their brains can figure out that we're not alone and we have been visited. I don't care what anyone says; it's true, and and somebody may have made love to an alien on this planet, and we don't know. Adam and Eve, maybe. I don't know.
I think it goes beyond being visited. I think that there's a very concealed historical truth in our past that not only have we been visited and still are, but our DNA has been altered in a manner that has changed the human species into a free living being and into a type of slave species. I mean, that might be a more negative way that some people could perceive to look at it, but to me, it still makes more sense.
Yeah, yeah. So George, we've got about I guess, around another 15 minutes to go here, and I want to give you an opportunity to get out anything else that you'd like to talk about, and maybe in the near future here we can get you on my show, Late Night in the Midlands, and we could do a full 2.5 hours one night, and maybe play some more of your music. I really like that.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Well, one thing came to mind when Michael said, I don't know what we're going to do about it, because, I put it about 60% of the population and still would rather turn on the TV and take a pill and, get through the day. I think we're around 40% of people are aware to one extent or another, and then a smaller percentage are totally awake. But something I said to Roxy Lopez when I was on one of her programs one time, I said, we can't take everybody with us. We can't bring everybody with us. We can't reach everybody. I can't help everybody. And I think it's okay to say, I can't help you. Because my name in Mayan, in another culture, in another calendric system, my name is 13 deer, and what 13 deer, part of what that means is helper or hand, a healer or a teacher, a helper, is part of what my name means in that other culture. And I'm here to help humanity. I'm here to make the planet and in our world, in my world, a better place. And I'm driven to do that. Like I said, I'm a truth teller, and I'm going to be indomitable about it. You're not going to stop me from doing it. Well, I think it's okay to say, I can't help you. Because I can't help everybody on this planet. I can't bring everybody with me on this journey. And I think we have to reach the ones that are receptive. And it was actually one of my friends here in Nashville, Arvel Bird, who happens to be Paiute, but he actually kind of brought that to my attention, because I used to hammer out these emails and sending them to these idiots, and they mailed, and in fact it was about that chemtrail in the metro science guy that precipitated it, Arvel's comment to me, and he just said, when they're ready, they'll listen. When they're ready, they'll hear you. And I just said, man, to myself, I said, man, you just got to calm down. You just got to relax, because Arvel is totally right on. He's totally right. I can't reach everybody, and when they're ready, they're going to hear the message. So I just put the message out there and hope people pick up on it. And I do it every single day. This is, Michael, what you were saying, asking that, what can we do? This is what I do with my spiritual work, and I do it every day. I go to the grocery store, the grocery clerk's walking out with me, carries groceries, and I point up at the sky, and I say, look at those trails up there. And they go, what's that? And I say, it's chemicals. They're spraying chemicals. And they go, what for? And I said, I don't know, do you have internet? Google it, look it up on the internet. And that's all I do. I don't give them a dissertation. I don't give them one of my research papers. I just go, hey man, what is that? And then if they're ready, it's like a seed blossoming, if they're ready and the water was on there and ready to germinate, they're going to do it. But I would like to treat just a couple of things. I'd like to pass on to our listeners. You didn't ask a question about it, either of you guys, and I really appreciate it, Ryan and Michael, that you've had me on. It's been real, man.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. But I'd like to mention a few of the sources I use, and I feel so bad that people use television. It's almost as bad as 20 years ago people reading Newsweek or Time magazine or something. It's so bad, you know. You're getting, like Ryan said, that's where you're getting your social programming in education and TV and movies and stuff. But here's where I go. If I want to know about geopolitical things, geopolitical truth, I go to James Corbett. He's absolutely excellent. James Corbett, Corbett, the Corbett Report. He's excellent. I go to, for geopolitical, I go to Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. He's a truth teller. He's a bright, bright guy. And he has more integrity than everybody I know except one music friend here. He's got incredible integrity. He was under the Nixon administration, and I think the Clinton years in D.C. He was an insider, and he's called, under the Reagan and up through Clinton, and he's called the father of Reaganomics. It so happens that he's got high integrity. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. Another one for geopolitical. Inside the Beltline, I go to Dr. Ron Paul. Every Monday morning, he has a 7-minute or 5-minute update of happenings there. For real truth about everything, from Planet X to, what to brush your teeth with, Jim Marrs, Marrs.
Oh, yeah.
Great truth teller. We correspond occasionally. I correspond to him, and occasionally I get an email back from him. The HARP report, for everything geoengineering, this cat doing the HARP report, HAARP, the HARP report on YouTube, amazing. He's going to lay it out for you, the HARP, the geoengineering, the chem spraying. Really fantastic source. I hope he's taking care of his safety, his personal safety. And then I go to probably my biggest source overall for non-mainstream would be Coast to Coast AM. It's normally posted every day on YouTube, the previous nights, Coast to Coast with George Noory. Just excellent array of topics, everything from ghosts to Planet X to chronic pain, just criminals, just anything and everything. He'll address it. And it tends to be pretty well non-mainstream and pretty good sources. So that's one of my best sources. And finally, what I use for some of those topical current event things, I actually tune in. There's a radio program here that's Phil Valentine. We call him Dr. Phil or Uncle Phil. He's on talk radio, so when I'm driving, I pick him up. And talk radio, he'll hit topical events. He's non-mainstream, but he'll feed you the mainstream stuff, too. He's pretty good. And that's all I have, guys. I'll take any questions or anything you want.
All right. I think I'm good. Ryan, how about you?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty good for the night, too. I appreciate you taking the time to come on to the show and talk about Planet X, and we even talked about chemtrails, or geoengineering is what I like to call it.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
fun.
Well, George, I thank you so much, and we'll have to get you back on another night and do a full show.
Sure.
But I enjoyed the information that I had got by email from you, and I had to get you on. I appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll probably talk to you again in the future. And it's good to agree and disagree on some things. Like I used to be a fan of Coast to Coast myself, but after a while I realized that I didn't get much information from them. So in that respect, I disagree with a source, but that doesn't mean that I disagree with the rest of your work. So just throwing it out there, it's good to disagree and still be civil about it and come together and understand that we can still have disagreements and still agree at the same time.
Sure.
Yeah, I think Coast to Coast tends to turn me on to ideas, and I don't necessarily take their sources as being 100% credible or reliable. But they might turn me on to a new topic like the chronic pain one, for instance. I didn't know anything about that. And so I do get some general knowledge from it sometimes, and I go out on my own and investigate it from there. So I'm with you on that. I wasn't trying to say that that one should take their information as gospel by any means. I don't think so. I don't think you should take anybody's information as gospel. Be critical always of everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, George, thank you again, and
pick up another degree in computer science or business, something sexy. Those were hot fields then in the 80s. And in just 2 years or 3 years investment in my time, I could be making the same amount of money where I could afford a brand new car, which was very important to me then, or a house so I could have a family. And so I decided to go back to school, and I just loved computer science and mathematics. I absolutely loved it. And I got a degree, and I worked for a year and a half, and then I went on and got a master's at Texas A&M University, one of the top 10 at that time in engineering. And then I took a job close to Nashville, down in Huntsville, where I was above top secret. Actually, I was FBI, SBSI, federal compartmentalized security clearance, building software for the feds on a DoD project. And then after a year and a half, we finished that project. We finished the contract. You could either find another job in the company or bail, and I decided to bail. And NASA, Lockheed at NASA Johnson Space Center, flew me out for an interview. And they gave me an expense account for 5 days. They gave me a car and an expense account, hotel for 5 days, and they talked to me they toured me through the Johnson Space Center base for a day. You get a full day. And I used to tour over there, and this will be might be a good segue into sort of my past.
all right.
The deep mysterious past of the many different George McClures who have wandered this planet. But I actually used to tour over there. I moved to Nashville 23 years ago to resume my writing and music career. And I had one goal in mind, which was to play music for a living again, which I had done previously, of course. And then I struck on a venue base that was unexplored, and people didn't know about it. It was brand new as a kind of a condo market. And I started spreading out from Nashville to Atlanta, and then I went over to Carolina because I'd lived in Carolina for 7 years, so around Charlotte and the Tri-Cities. And then it was just a hop and a skip and a jump down there to Rock Hill, and then from Rock Hill down to Greenville and Columbia. So I ended up touring through that part of the country for several years. And so I toured for about 10 years in the 90s, and then I reinvented myself or remade myself into a record producer, and I've recorded since then. In the 00 decade, I've recorded about 50 to 60, over 50 albums for other people, and I have 2 albums of my own and DVDs and so on of my own, but I was a record producer for other people, helping them. So that's what I've been doing for the last couple of decades. But before that, skipping back to when I graduated University of Arizona with a bachelor's in anthropology and cognition. I'm making a little bit of tea. And cognitive anthropology, which is kind of a study of language and thought and reality. And it was a brand new field at that time. And I promptly became a deadbeat professional musician. You know, I already knew I was going to be a musician because I was playing enough I could support myself, and I became a professional musician. And I did that for about 5 years, and I'll try to make this the thumbnail sketch. I wrote a book, the first book on improvisation for five-string banjo, and it was the only book for about 20 years. Finally, somebody wrote another one. It's called Variations on Theme. But then I got parked over in Carolina, Michael, up just north of you. I was over in Charlotte area, and I thought I could spend another 15 years in music and maybe be able to buy a new car and a house if I'm really lucky after 15 years. Or I could go back to college, the most prestigious day job in the history of music. Mike Curb had a pretty darn good day job, Curb Records. Mike Curb was the Secretary of State, if I remember right. He was the Secretary of State for the state of California. He was pretty high up the food chain. And he moved here and, of course, founded Curb Records, which is essentially like a major label now. So that's my history, Michael. Pretty much a two-thumbnail version of it.
I see. Now, in your time, you've done some pretty extensive studies, you say, on Planet X and things of that nature. So I thought maybe we could start there, unless you had something you wanted to throw in beforehand.
Well, no, I think just to compound your question is maybe what got you started, what intrigued you, what moved you in the direction of beginning to research Planet X or Nibiru or whatever you choose to call it.
Okay, cool. Let's see, some research on the dwarf twin star Nibiru, Planet X. Okay, well, what I did, you guys, and I think you'll dig this, Ryan and Michael, is I have a sense that, even though I don't know each of you very well, I have a sense that you're probably independent operators to some extent, because you've got a radio show, and Ryan, they tour, just I call the tourist guest. And then the next day, they talked to me in the morning, and went out and ate lunch, and then I was done. So I had 3.5 days of expense account in a car to do whatever I wanted before my plane flew me back to Alabama. So it looked pretty good there, and they offered me a pretty good jump up in money. And if you're in anything engineering, who could turn down a space job anyway?
Sure.
So I took it. I took it knowing deep in my heart and my soul that I was doing the wrong thing, but I did it anyway because, you know, I don't really want to be a rocket scientist or a mathematician. I really want to be who I am now. You know, I really want to be a singer and a performing artist and a writer and, you know, a spiritualist, which are the things I really am. So I took the job because who could turn it down? And it only lasted a short 1.5, 2 years. And I said, take this job and shove it. I did it very politely, but I resigned and, like Johnny Paycheck, take this job and shove it. And I packed it up in my pickup truck and moved to Nashville with not a damn thing to my name but the pickup truck and a banjo and a guitar. And, well, I did own a little mobile home park out there in Texas.
Yeah.
But I moved here and went from, I probably had what is quite possibly